Hey guys, it's Shadow. Today we're going to be ranking every single civ's unique technology in Castle Age. This was partially inspired by a Spirit of the Lore video that I saw, so I'll link that down in the description below. Shall we begin? First up, we have the Aztecs with the unique technology Atlassal. It increases your skirmisher range by 1 and your attack by 1. It costs 400 food and 350 gold. I don't think it's the strongest unique technology in the game by any stretch of the imagination. But I think it's useful, especially if you're already making a lot of skirmishes and you already have a castle up, as it's not super expensive. You'll obviously want to get your Bodkin Arrow and Brace upgrades before this if you are in Imperial Age, but it's still a good thing to have at some point. For me, it'll be going into the C tier, as it's useful but not game-changing. Second on the list, we have the Berbers with Casbah. This increases your castle work speed by 25% for your entire team. This includes yourself, of course. It only costs 250 food and 250 gold, and if you're going for your unique unit, the Camel Archer, it's really helpful in terms of boosting your production. It also increases the production speed of Trebs and Petards as well, which is especially useful for the Treb wars. It also does impact all of your other all of your other technologies such as hoardings and Mugrabi camels as well. For me, this is an S tier unique technology because it's so cheap. You're always going to want to pick this up if you're in a team game, in my opinion, and you're going for unique units, or even without. Just having the faster production of Trebs is just such a good bonus. Next up, we have the Britons with Yeoman. This increases your archer range by 1. This also impacts skirmishes, and it also gives you +2 on your tower attack. The main problem with this technology is not that it isn't useful, it's that it's very expensive. It costs 750 wood and 450 gold. In my opinion, most of the time you're better off investing into getting to Imperial Age first, getting all of your upgrades such as Bracer and Chemistry, before going for Human. It is still a useful technology to get at some point, but the Britons already having such a large range bonus kind of negates the impact that this ends up having. For me, this is a D tier unique technology, not because it's bad, but because it's expensive and it's kind of situational. Next up, we have the Bulgarians with the unique tech stirrups. It increases your cavalry attack speed by 33% and it only costs 400 food and 200 gold. For me, this is one of the strongest unique techs, just because it makes it your knights in late Castle Age really powerful, and your early Imperial Age cavalry are much stronger than other civs. It also means that your Hussar in the late game are some of the strongest as well. For me, this is definitely an S tier bonus, as it makes it, especially for a 1v1. In a team game, when you include Paladin, it doesn't quite stack up as well, but for 1v1s, it's one of the strongest unique techs in my opinion. And next up, we have the Burgundians with the Burgundian Vineyards. It converts your food stockpile into gold at a 2-to-1 ratio, and farmers also generate some gold. It costs 400 food and 300 gold. For 1v1s, this is one of those situationally powerful techs, as you don't really want to be flooding too much food anyway, but you can make it so you can control how much of your food gets converted to gold by queuing additional villages and technologies and units, and then dequeuing them later. It's also really powerful for team games because you can get your allies to tribute you a certain amount of food that they are floating, and then send them back gold if they are in need of gold. So for me, this is probably an A tier, bordering on an S tier Civ bonus. We'll see about moving them up a little bit later. And next up, we have the Burmese with Haldar. It gives you a battle elephant +1 melee and pierce armor. It costs 400 food and 300 wood. This is one of those kind of situational unique techs, just because Burmese often don't go for elephants. Elephants are quite an expensive unit to take into, and the monks are obviously a big counter to them, and so are halbs. I kind of don't like the idea of this tech being very high in the Civ tier list, just because it's not one of those ones you get very often. It's not that powerful, and the elephants are tanky anyway. If you are going for mass elephants, is of course worth to get at some point, but for me, it's going to be in the E tier due to its lack of usability in most games. Next up, we have the Byzantines with Greek Fire. It increases your fire ship range by 1, and it gives you and it costs 250 food and 300 gold. This is obviously completely useless on land maps, and even on water maps, I don't find this to be the most revolutionary tech most of the time. Yes, it means that they trade better against units that they don't always trade that well against, but it's still the investment into the castle to specifically get this unique tech, in my opinion, is pretty much never worth it. It's gonna go in the F tier for me just because it's so situationally useful, and most of the times not. Next up, we have the Celts with Stronghold. It increases your firing rate of castles and towers by 25% and only costs 250 food and 200 gold. This isn't the most useful technology just because Celts don't get Bracer, and a lot of the time, if you're going for like halb siege compositions, you won't have a lot of castles on the map. But if you already have quite a few castles or even a few towers to try and protect your economy, it can be situationally useful, and it's pretty cheap upgrade, and it makes it so taking fights underneath your castles it's less easy for your opponent. So it's gonna go in the D tier just above Yeoman for me. Next up is Chinese with the Great Wall technology. It increases wall and tower hit points by 30%, costs 400 wood and 200 stone. The issue with this technology, similar to what Spirit of the Law was saying in his video, is that stone cost. That being said, in team games specifically, if you have a large percentage of the map already walled, it can be really worth getting this technology. And even in 1v1s, there are times where you could potentially see it having some usability as well. It's going to go on the D tier again, just below Britain's though. Next up, we have the humans with Steppe Husbandry. It increases the production rate of scouts, steppe lancers, and cavalry archers by 100%, and it only costs 200 food and 300 wood. The important part here is mostly for the scout cavalry line. Obviously, being able to flood hussars in the late game is really powerful, and being able to produce yours so much quicker than your opponent is a huge advantage. I don't think that it's quite an S tier bonus, but it's going to be an A tier 100% for me. After this, we have the Ethiopians with Royal Heirs. It increases the Shota warrior production speed by 100% and costs 300 food and 300 gold. I don't find this to be the most useful new technology just because Shota warriors already produce pretty damn quick. I've once gone SC unique unit and then tried adding TCs and also got this technology. I couldn't keep up with the production just because of how quick they produce with this technology. And also, Shota warriors aren't the strongest unit that Ethiopians have to offer. For me, they're probably E tier bordering on a D tier technology. And next up, we have the Franks of Chivalry. It increases your stable work speed by 40%. This also impacts things such as Cavalier, Paladin, Husbandry, although you'll generally have Husbandry before you get this technology. Of course, as well as making your units produce a bit faster. This is one of those really good technologies to get, especially if you are planning to get Cavalier or Paladin, just so you have the power spike happen a bit quicker. These technologies take a long time to research, and shaving off precious minutes of time can make it so you can take better fights before your opponent is fully teched into counters. It's going to go just above the human Steppe Husbandry just because it is able to be used for a slightly wider range of things, and it still impacts your units as well. Next we have the Goths with Anarchy. It makes it so your Huskarls can be trained from barracks and it costs 450 food and 250 gold. It's one of those technologies that you'll almost always want to pick up as Goths if you're planning to go Huskarls, but you don't want to do it too early just because you can't keep up with the production from your castle and your barracks on such a small eco, especially with this unique tech costing quite a decent amount of food. It's going to be A tier just above the Burgundian vineyards, just because of how frequently it's used. It is very useful technology to get at some point in most games as Goths. Similar to the Goths, the Huns also have a bonus that allows their unique unit to be produced from military buildings. This time it's the Tarkans being produced from stables. Marauders cost 300 wood and 200 gold. Tarkans, unlike Huskarls, have a little bit more of a limited usage. They're very resistant to arrows, but they don't trade particularly well against other cavalry units, and obviously struggle against halbs and monks as usual, and camels as well, of course. So that means the Huskarls have a little bit more general usability that Tarkans do. That being said, if you are wanting to mass Tarkans in the late game, it is a good technology to get at some point. I'm probably going to put it in the D tier just above the Celt Stronghold bonus though. Coming up next, we have the Incas with the Andean Sling. It removes the minimum range of skirmishers and slingers. It costs 200 food and 300 gold. Out of all of the meso bonuses for skirmishers, this is, in my opinion, the least useful. If you're already in a position with your slingers and skirmishers where they're at a minimum range, they're probably already losing to the unit they're in a minimum range to. Less so slingers against infantry, of course. I think this is more useful for slingers than it is for skirmishers. But it's going to be going in the D tier below probably Great Wall, in my opinion. Possibly even E tier. It's just not a particularly useful technology to get. Although it is pretty cheap, so you might as well pick it up in the late game if you have res floating. Coming up next, we have the Sultan's upgrade from Indians. It makes it so that your all forms of gold gathering are 10% faster. It costs 400 food and 400 wood. So this is a trash upgrade to make it so your gold collections is faster. This is useful for markets. This is market trade, sorry. This is useful for gold mining in general. This is useful for relics. I don't think it's like a top tier one, but it is definitely a nice bonus that the Indians have. And impacting relics and trade makes it a really versatile bonus. I'm gonna go in the B tier, unlike the Indian Civ, which I would probably put in the F tier on all other accounts. Next up, we have the Italians with Pavese. It increases the archer and condottiero armor, both pierce and melee by 1. It costs 300 food and 150 gold, so it is pretty cheap. And if you're already going for archers or condottieros, it's definitely worth picking up, assuming you have a castle available. I don't think this is like the strongest bonus because when you're in an archer ball, you generally want a meat shield there anyway. But it makes it so that they trade better against your standard archers. I'm going to put it in the B tier just because it's obviously, you still want a meat shield with your archers. But your archers receiving less damage when you do run out that meat shield isn't very useful. And also, the Condottiero is getting a bit of a buff when you need to mix them in, is also pretty strong. Coming up next, we have probably one of my favorite neat technologies, the Japanese Yasama. It makes it so your towers fire 2 additional arrows and it costs 300 food and 300 wood. That being said, it's quite limited in usage because you can't investing so much into building the towers is often quite an upfront investment, and then getting a Sama on top of it, which means you need a castle there to get it, is pretty hard to get to. I will be putting this in the C tier just because of its general usability, but in terms of me actually liking the technology, it's probably in the S tier. Coming up next, we have the Khmer with the Tusk Swords. It increases your battle elephant attack by 3, and it costs 300 wood and 450 gold. I don't think it's the most crucial technology in the game, but if you're already going battle elephants, which is pretty common in team games as Khmer, I think it's a really good technology to get, and it's not overly expensive, and they already have the faster moving elephants. I'm probably going to put this in the B tier just above the Italian bonus, just because the elephants do get a significant bonus from this change, whereas the extra armor on the Italians isn't quite as big in my opinion. Next up, we have the unique tech from the Koreans, Yupseong. Yupseong gives the towers an extra 2 range. It costs 300 food and 300 wood. It kind of synergizes with some of the other bonuses, such as the towers getting free upgrades, and you generally want to go for a castle for war wagons with Koreans anyway. That being said, it's not a technology that you would instantly pick up unless you have a lot of towers already on the field. For me, this is going to go in the C tier just above the Aztecs. I think it's got slightly more of a case usage than Atl does, but not significantly more so. Next up, we have the Lithuanians with Hill Forts. Hill Forts gives town centers an extra 3 range and costs 250 food and 250 gold. It's not the most useful technology. It can be situationally nice if you're getting raided quite a bit, Being able to shoot at targets an extra 3 range away means that you can place farms a little bit further away from the TC and get away with it, essentially. And it's pretty cheap as well. That being said, I don't see it as a crucial technology, and most of the time it's barely helpful. You'd rather be walled than having to shoot down raiding units anyway. So it's going to be a D tier one, just above the Huns. Magyars get Korean army. It removes the Magyar Hussar gold cost, but it costs 200 food and 300 gold. Magyar Hussars only actually cost 10 gold. So this technology is only useful if you're planning to make more than 30 Magyar Hussars. So this is one of those things where if you are just going to mix in a couple of Magyar Hussars, do not get this technology first. It is a complete waste of resources. But if you're in the late game, you've got quite a few castles up, and you're planning to make massed Magyar Hussar, of course this technology is absolutely worth picking up. So it's a little bit more situational than other unique technologies in Castle Age, but it's really strong at times. For me, this is a B tier one, probably just above the Italians. Maybe even slightly above the Khmer, actually, now I think about it. Malay get Thalassocracy. Can never pronounce that word. Which upgrades docks into harbors that shoot additional arrows. Obviously, docks don't usually count as a defensive building, but Malay harbors do. It only costs 300 food and 300 gold, so again, it's a pretty cheap technology. It's pretty useful on water maps and occasionally hybrids. It just means that your opponent can't raise your fish trap eco if you've got some fish trap eco set up as easily as they would normally be able to. It's not the strongest technology, and harbors did get pretty badly nerfed in DE from memory. So it will be a D tier one as well. I'm gonna say just below, either below Huns or Celts, I think. Probably even below Yeoman, honestly. It's so situationally useful. And just with harbors being as weak as they are currently, I think that's probably below Britain's at least. Next up, we have the Malian unique tech, Tigui. It makes it so your town centers fire arrows without being garrisoned, and it's pretty cheap. It only costs 200 food and 300 wood. If you're floating resources anyway and you have a castle, I think it's a good technology to pick up. But it's not like it's going to protect you from raiding altogether. It just means that if you're not paying attention to a certain area, it can kind of compensate a little bit. It's another one of those ones similar to the Lithuanians one where you're better off being walled, but at least it's kind of giving you a bit of value as well without having to garrison villages. So I'm thinking it's a D tier just below the Lithuanians, maybe even slightly above actually now I think about it. Mines used to get obsidian arrows, but nowadays they get the Hulchi Javelineers. It only costs 300 food and 300 gold, and it makes it so your skirmishers fire 2 projectiles. This secondary projectile doesn't actually do that much damage, but this is especially useful when you're dealing with siege units, surprisingly. Normally, if you are using skirmishers and you're against siege units, you struggle quite significantly to take them out. Whereas if you are against siege units and you're using the Hulchi Javelineers, this additional 1 damage really adds up against siege rams and capped rams. Here I actually did a video on this, which I'll link in the description below, and you can see them in action. For me, this is probably a B tier just above the Indians unique tech Sultans. I don't think it's a must get every game, but it's actually pretty surprisingly strong in certain case usages. Mongols get nomads. This makes it so you don't have to, well, when you lose houses, you don't lose pop space from having those houses destroyed. It only costs 300 wood and 150 gold. I don't think it's the most revolutionary technology. That being said, when you're already ahead, you have a castle up, and you have a bit of res floating, I think it's actually a pretty good technology to get. It's pretty niche. Obviously, replacing houses isn't that expensive, but replacing houses and losing your advantage because you can't get units out is a pretty big problem. So I'm actually going to put this on the B tier again, probably just below the Italian one. But I actually personally quite like nomads. Another one that had the unique tech changed in DE is the Persians. They used to get boiling oil, but now they get commanderan. It makes it so the archer line costs 60 wood instead of so it removes the gold cost completely and makes it cost us a little bit more on the wood, 60 wood instead of 25. In DE, it costs 400 food and 300 gold. This technology is actually really powerful, and in my opinion, it's another one of those S tier ones, especially for 1v1. Any kind of form of these upgrades to make a gold unit, a trash unit, are usually pretty powerful, and this is no exception. It means that your opponent's halves will be absolutely shredded because trash bow do much better against them than scams do, and trash bow also do much better against every other unit type except other archers. So mixing in trash bows with most Persian army comps can be pretty effective. Next up, we have the Portuguese with Korak. Now, similar to the Byzantine bonus, this is only useful for water and occasionally hybrid maps, which means its case usage is pretty limited. And also, it's not like a huge bonus. Yes, having an extra 1 ship armor and PS armor is nice. It means that you will take trades more efficiently, especially with the Portuguese larger amount of HP on their ships. But again, it doesn't feel like worth the investment for a castle and for the unique tech as well. If you weren't already going for a castle. So again, for me, it's going to be in the F tier with the Byzantine bonus. If we were talking specifically only about water maps, obviously these two civs would be a lot higher than they currently are. But I'm mostly kind of focusing on their usage for most maps as opposed to just a couple of maps. Next up, we have Saracens with Madrasa. It makes it so monks return 33 gold when killed. And is it actually pretty cheap, only costing 200 food and 100 gold? The problem is that, again, it's one of those, like, you don't often need to get a castle particularly early as Saracens. And this technology isn't that great unless you're making massed monks. It does, in theory, pay for the gold cost after you've lost at least 3 monks, but as it's a rebate, as opposed to making the monks themselves cheaper, it's not as strong as it possibly could be. In my opinion, this is going to be one of those E tier ones, maybe even F tier. It's not something I think I've ever gotten in any of my games. Maybe even F tier, because like even on land maps, it's not that useful, and on water maps, it's even less useful. So we're gonna give Saracens the dishonorable mention here. Next up, we have another one of the new civs, the First Crusade. This is 100% getting nerfed. It is way too strong right now. It makes it so that you spawn 10 sergeants from up to 5 town centers, which can mean an extra 50 units just spawn out of nowhere. It's 300 food, 600 gold, so it is actually quite an expensive technology to get, and getting all of the upgrades and the town centers down in the first place is quite expensive. But assuming that you've got all of that there, and you've even if you haven't got 200 pop at that moment, it's still absolutely worth getting this technology, and you can basically overwhelm your opponent. I do hope it gets nerfed in the next patch, because at the moment it is just way too powerful. And it's going to be probably I think it's probably the most powerful Castle Age unique technology that we currently have. Hey, it's Shadow from the future. Literally the day after recording this video, a new update was released. This nerfed the Sicilian First Crusade unique technology to have 7 sergeants per town centre instead of 10. I still think it'll be strong, and I think it'll be an S tier Castle Age UT, but I'd put it behind Berbers for now. Next up, we have Slavs with Orthodoxy, which increases monk armor by 3, both melee and pierce. And it costs 200 food and 300 gold. This is another one of those techs where I don't think I've ever had much usage for it. Obviously, it does make it so that they're a little bit tankier against certain units, but the idea of monks is that they don't get engaged on in the first place. So for me, it's not one of those probably E or F tier bonuses. I'm thinking maybe F tier. I think the Portuguese bonus is more useful in more situations than Orthodoxy is, honestly. Another one of the monk techs is Inquisition from the Spanish. It makes it so monks and missionaries convert faster. And it's 100 food and 300 gold. Now, unlike both of the other bonuses, these make your monks and missionaries actually more effective. Which is why I think that it's a slightly stronger Castle Age unique technology than the Slavs or the Saracens. I still don't think it has the biggest case usage of Castle Age unique technologies, but it's a decent thing to get, especially as Spanish you'll often be on stone to get conquistadors out anyway, and you'll often make monks or missionaries as a part of their late game army compositions. So I'm gonna put it as an E, just above the Burmese. Another one of these really strong technologies, on the other hand, is the Tatars. They get silk armor, which makes that your scout line, set lancers, and cavalry archers have an extra melee armor and pierce armor, giving them some of the best scout line cavalry in the game, and also making their cavalry archers surprisingly a little bit more tanky. For me, this is a it's hard actually with this one. I think I'm actually going to move the Franks up to the S tier here, just above the Tatars, and I think the Tatars is going to be an S tier as well. Probably bordering on that A tier though. Actually, I think I'm happier with the Tatars being just below the human the step husbandry from humans. The Tatar bonus is really big and it does improve the quality of your units, but it doesn't help you fill up your ranks as easily as the Franks and humans do. I'm a little bit torn on that one, honestly. Next up, we have the Teutons with Ironclad. It increases your siege weapon armor by 4, and it costs 400 gold and 350 gold. Unless you're playing an arena or a closed map, generally speaking, going mass siege is not ideal. Just because they're a lot slower than most other units, and it's harder to move them across the map. That being said, it's a useful technology when you already have siege units in the field. And it makes it so it's a lot harder to snipe them with cavalry as a major example. So it's going to be a C tier just above the Koreans. Next up, we have the Turks with Sipahi. It makes it so your cavalry archers have an additional 20 HP. It also only costs 350 food and 150 gold. If you're going CA as Turks and you already have a castle up, I don't think there's any reason to skip this upgrade. It makes it so they have the tankiest CA in the game, and also arguably the strongest in Castle Age, in my opinion. For me, this is probably an A or a B tier bonus, maybe just below the mines actually, because it's very specific to one unit type, but it does really increase the usability of CA and makes them so much stronger in situations when they're getting chased down by knights and camels, for example. Next, we have the Vietnamese with Chatras, which increases your battle elephant HP by 50. It costs 250 food, 250 gold, and if you're already going to have battle elephants, similar to the Burmese bonus, I don't think there's any reason on skipping this bonus. That being said, again, battle elephants are a little bit situational, and I believe Vietnamese probably get some of the weaker versions. Like, they're very tanky, but unlike Khmer, they don't get the bonus speed and bonus attack. Malay get them much cheaper, and Burmese get the tankier ones against arrows and melee. Maybe it's slightly better than the Burmese because I think the extra 50 HP makes them more suited as a meat shield in team games than the Burmese ones are. I'm going to place it in the E tier for the moment. And last but not least, we have the Vikings, who actually recently received a nerf on the Chieftain's technology. It gives you 5 bonus of damage against cavalry with infantry and 4 against camels. It costs 700 food and 500 gold, which is a massive increase from last patch, I believe. As a technology, it's extremely powerful in my opinion, because that's because it means that you can overwhelm your opponent's cavalry and usually skirm composition if that's what they've gone for against your own archer composition. That being said, with its increased cost, it does make it a lot harder to attack into, but I think it's essential if you're going for like a Berserk Flood or you're going for Champ Switch at any point. Whereas something like Yeoman, which costs something relatively similar, it doesn't change the unit counters nearly as much. So I'm actually going to place this in the A tier, just above Silk Armor, I think. Even though Silk Armor is significantly cheaper and does give your units a decent amount of extra tank, I think Chieftains is the stronger technology and also changes the Berserkers in quite a considerable way. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. We may make some more of these tier lists if you guys are enjoying them. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.